Origin chance almost as you reaction. This is the real reason Putin is invading Ukraine by the channel Johnny Harris. I've done Johnny Harris video in the past about I think was Suez Canal where the ship was stuck there. So the quality of his videos are really good. His presentation is good. So I guess this will be an interesting video. I saw the real life lore video yesterday, which was in very detail, a half-an-hour video. This is a week-old video, so obviously he's not going to talk about the recent events, but I guess he's still going to talk about the build-up, because this is not just some immediate thing. This was building up for past few weeks. So yeah, let's go this one.
The Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Momentum is building for a war between Ukraine and Russia.
Tensions between Russia and the West are growing rapidly.
President Biden considering deploying thousands of troops to Eastern Europe.
There are now 100,000 troops on the eastern border of Ukraine. Russia is setting up field hospitals on this border.
What?
This is what preparation for war looks like, a legitimate war.
Ukrainian.
What? There were field hospitals, the tents and everything they were building, Russia was building at the Ukraine border. No shit, they were going to go to war. I mean, you don't just build something that you need during the war just for the fuck of it, right? Damn, this is just heavy.
Troops are watching and waiting, saying they are preparing for a fight.
The US has ordered the families of embassy staff to leave Ukraine. Britain has sent all of their non-essential staff home. And now the US is sending tons of weapons and munitions to Ukraine's army. And we're even considering deploying our own troops to the region. I mean, this thing is heating up. Meanwhile, Russia and the West have been in Geneva and Brussels trying to talk it out.
Alright, I don't want to pause too much, and obviously I'm not an expert when it comes to geopolitics or politics in general. But, you know, Russia was putting field hospitals and 100,000 troops on the Ukrainian border for a long time now before they started invading. So, wouldn't it be a smart strategy for US to just send troops at the Ukrainian border? I mean, no way Russia would have invaded if US soldiers were already there. There would have been aggression towards US that Russia would never do, right? Because right now, if USA steps in, Russia can see that as aggression towards Russia, right? But if US soldiers are already there, then Russia can't invade. I mean, and there is even, even a reason behind that. Like when Ukraine gave up nuclear weapons decades ago, US in UK and some countries encouraged that we will be there for security if you need it, but just give up your nuclear weapons, and they did. So US could have used that as an excuse, like, okay, this is why we promised security and we are here. I don't know. Maybe that's not that could be seen as an aggression towards Russia. Maybe, I don't know about that, but I don't know, wouldn't that have worked?
And sort of getting nowhere.
The message is very clear. Should Russia take further aggressive actions against Ukraine, the costs will be severe and the consequences serious.
It's a scary, grim
Banks are out of
momentum
Swift
that is
now.
unpredictable. And the chances of miscalculation and escalation are growing. I want to explain what's going on here, but I want to show you that this isn't just typical geopolitical behavior, stuff that can just be explained on the map. Instead, to understand why 100,000 troops are camped out on Ukraine's eastern border, ready for war, you have to understand Russia and how it's been cut down over the ages, from a Slavic empire that dominated this whole region to then the Soviet Union, which was defeated in the 90s. And what you
Days of
really
Keanu-
have to
Keanu-
understand here is how that hit.
Keanu Rus. Yeah, I was saying Keanu Rus, like what the fuck? Okay. So yeah, Russia was builded, I guess. I mean, I know Russia's history. I started this as a history channel now. Reacted to lots of Russian history, Soviet Union history, and I guess I understand Putin was a KGB agent during the Soviet Union time, if I remember correctly. So his mentality is towards the old Soviet Union and some of the countries that were part of it. So that's kind of understandable. So to me, it feels like after watching real life lore video and having the knowledge that I feel like there are lots of elements that kind of gives the Putin that mentality, like Ukraine is part of or something like that.
History is transposed onto the brain of one man, this guy, Vladimir Putin. This is a story about regional domination and struggles between big powers, but really, it's the story about what Vladimir Putin really wants.
Russian troops moving swiftly to take control of military bases in Crimea.
Russia is amassing more than 100,000 troops and a lot of military hardware at the border with Ukraine.
Before we go any further, I want to say thank you to today's sponsor, which is BetterHelp. BetterHelp is a platform that allows you to access therapy. I'm a major fan of therapy. I've been doing it for over 2 years now, and it has changed my entire world. I really believe that therapy is overstigmatized and not accessible to people, and BetterHelp is trying to change that, which I really believe in and support. With BetterHelp, you can quickly sign up and you take a little quiz and it connects you to a network of thousands and thousands of professionals who you can start talking with today. There are a variety of experts in different fields of therapy within BetterHelp's network. So you can find somebody who is right for you. And for me, I didn't have any particular specific issue that I was going to therapy for. I just started therapy and I realized that it was just incredibly helpful to have someone to talk to and to learn how to express my feelings and to learn how to talk about what was happening inside of my brain. BetterHelp is not a crisis line, it's not self-help, it is licensed, legitimate, professional therapists who you connect with over the internet securely, which is great because therapy is usually really hard to figure out. Where's the right therapist? How do I get in? How do I book it? All of that is usually very difficult, at least in my experience. And so BetterHelp is making it easier. So if you want to try this out, you can get 10% off your first month of BetterHelp by going to the link in my description. Thank you, BetterHelp, for supporting my channel, for supporting this work. Let's dive back in. Okay, let's get up to speed on what's happening here. And I'm just gonna quickly give you the highlight version of like the news that's happening because I wanna get into the juicy part, which is like why, the roots of all of this. So let's go. A few months ago, Russia started sending more and more troops to this border. It's this massive border between Ukraine and Russia. They said they were doing a military exercise, but the rest of the world was like, yeah, we totally believe you, Russia. This was right before this big meeting where North American and European countries were coming together to talk about a lot of different things like these countries often do in these diplomatic summits. But soon, because of Russia's aggressive behavior coming in and setting up 100,000 troops on the border with Ukraine, the entire summit turned into a whole WTF Russia, what are you doing on the border of Ukraine meeting. Before the meeting, Putin comes out and says, listen, I have some demands for the West. And everyone's like, okay, Russia, what are your demands? You know, we have like COVID-19 right now and like that's like surging. So like, we don't need your like bluster about what your demands are. And Putin's like, no, here's my list of demands. Putin's demands for the summit were this. Number one, that NATO, which is this big military alliance.
Yeah, the more fucked up thing about this is that in Russia, the vaccination count is low and that's why fatality is high too because of COVID. So this affects Russia in a big number as well. So this is kind of weird.
Between US, Canada, and Europe, stop expanding, meaning they don't let any new members in, okay? So Russia's like, no more new members to your like cool military club that I don't like. You can't have any more members. Number two, that NATO withdraw all of their troops from anywhere in Eastern Europe. Basically, Putin is saying, I can veto any military cooperation or troops going between countries that have to do with Eastern Europe, the place that used to be the Soviet Union, okay? And number three, Putin demands that America vow not to protect its allies in Eastern Europe with nuclear weapons. LOL, said all of the other countries. You're literally nuts, Vladimir Putin. Like, these are the most...
I mean, come on, man. I mean, he's like, okay, I get it, the Soviet Union is no more, but I want to act like Soviet Union, right? I mean, he wants power for, Eastern European countries, like, okay, I'll veto, military actions, like, it's, you don't control those countries, right? At the same time, move out the troop, no more NATO. I mean, nobody's going to agree to this ever. Are you kidding me?
Most ridiculous demands ever. But there is Putin with these demands, these very, very aggressive demands. And he sort of is implying that if his demands aren't met, he's going to invade Ukraine. I mean, it doesn't work like this. This is not how international relations work. You don't just show up and say, like, I'm not going to allow other countries to join your alliance because it makes me feel uncomfortable. But what I love about this list of demands from Vladimir Putin for this summit is that it gives us a clue on what Vladimir Putin really wants, what he's after here. You read them closely and you can grasp his intentions. But to grasp those intentions, you have to understand what NATO is and what Russia and Ukraine used to be. Okay, so a while back I made this video about why Russia is so damn big, where I explain how modern day Russia started here in Kiev, which is actually modern day Ukraine. In other words, modern day Russia, as we know it, has its original roots in Ukraine. These places grew up together, and they eventually became a part of the same mega empire called the Soviet Union. They were deeply intertwined, not just in their history.
I mean, let's be honest, it started in Kiev and Rus, but after that there is a long history, right, before Soviet Union came. So I get it, lots of things start somewhere, right? I mean, lots of part of Pakistan, Afghanistan, right, lots of other countries was kind of like an Indus civilization, which is kind of people think of as India. But that's like India just going like, this was all India, we're going to take it back. I mean, come on, this is just fucked up. I mean, after that demands, I mean, it was very clear that Putin is going to do something extreme, right? Because his demands, nobody was going to accept, but he wanted that. And then he just did something extreme.
And their culture, but also in their economy and their politics. So it's after World War II, it's like the 50s, 60s, 70s, and NATO was formed, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. This was a military alliance between all of these countries that was meant to sort of deter the Soviet Union from...
I love this, look at that, the part of France.
between all of these countries that was meant to sort of deter the Soviet Union from expanding and taking over the world. But, as we all know, the Soviet Union, which was Russia and all of these other countries, collapsed in 1991. And all of these Soviet republics, including Ukraine, became independent, meaning they were not now a part of one big block of countries anymore. But just because the borders all split up, it doesn't mean that these cultural ties actually broke. Like, for example, the Soviet leader at the time of the collapse of the Soviet Union, this guy, Gorbachev, he was the son of a Ukrainian mother and a Russian father. Like, he grew up with his mother singing him Ukrainian folk songs. In his mind, Ukraine and Russia were like one thing. So there was major reluctance to accept Ukraine as a separate thing from Russia. In so many ways, they are one. There was another Russian at the time who did not accept this new division. This young intelligence officer, Vladimir Putin, who was starting to rise up in the ranks of post-Soviet Russia. There's this amazing quote from 2005 where Putin is giving the State of the Union address, where Putin declares the collapse of the Soviet Union, quote, the greatest catastrophe of the 20th century. And as for the Russian people, it became a genuine tragedy. Tens of millions of fellow citizens and countrymen found themselves beyond the fringes of Russian territory. Do you see how he frames this? The Soviet Union were all one people in his mind. And after it collapsed, all of these people who were a part of the motherland were now outside of the fringes or the boundaries of Russian territory. First off, fact check. Greatest catastrophe of the 20th century? Like, do you remember what else happened in the 20th century, Vladimir? Putin's worry about the collapse.
I think he means the greatest catastrophe for Soviet Union or Russia or the motherland. But even that's not true. Soviet Union lost ridiculous amount of soldiers in World War II. That was the greatest catastrophe. I mean, right now you can feel it, how the men to women ratio is, vastly different because of it.
Of this one people starts to get way worse when the West, his enemy, starts showing up to his neighborhood, to all these ex-Soviet countries that are now independent. The West starts selling their ideology of democracy and capitalism and inviting them to join their military alliance called NATO. And guess what? These countries are totally buying it. All these ex-Soviet countries are now joining NATO, and some of them the EU, and Putin is hating this. He's like, not only did the Soviet Union divide and all of these people are now outside of the Russia motherland, but now they're being persuaded by the West to join their military alliance. This is terrible.
Oh my God, can you believe those people? Like capitalism, right? Democracy, all those snowflakes chanting. Can you believe that? All the Kardashians? Really? That's not gonna come here. I mean, this paints the picture. I mean, it kind of makes sense. Putin being an intelligence officer, part of KGB, during the time of Soviet Union, you don't become an intelligence agent, a secret agent like that, right? Unless you're properly nationalistic, right? Like you believe in your nation really strongly, which was Soviet Union. And after the collapse, his speech that this is the greatest catastrophe, right? After the World Wars, he thinks this is the greatest catastrophe. Is this really far-fetched to think that he's trying to do all this? So that means not only Ukraine, I think other countries are in danger too, slowly, right? After Ukraine, right, if he succeeds there, he might try to, take other countries as well with some, whatever excuse. This is just fucked up. I mean, he already went after Georgia, right?
Terrible news. Over the years, this continues to happen while Putin himself starts to chip away at Russian institutions, making them weaker and weaker. He's silencing his rivals, and he's consolidating power in himself. And in the past few years, he's effectively silenced anyone who can challenge him. Any institution, any court, or any political rival have all been silenced. It's been decades since the Soviet Union fell, but as Putin gains more power, he still sees the region through the lens of the old Cold War, Soviet, Slavic Empire view. He sees this region as one big block that has been torn apart by outside forces. The greatest catastrophe of the 20th century. And the worst situation of all of these, according to Putin, is Ukraine, which was like the gem of the Soviet Union. There was tons of cultural heritage. Again, Russia sort of started in Ukraine. Not to mention, it was a very populous and...
Yeah, and the second biggest landmass in Europe after Russia, if I remember correctly, right?
Industrious, resource-rich place. And over the years, Ukraine has been drifting west. It hasn't joined NATO yet, but more and more it's been electing pro-Western presidents. It's been flirting with membership in NATO. It's becoming less and less attached to the Russian heritage that Putin so adores. And more than half of Ukrainians say that they'd be down to join the EU. 64% of them say that they would be cool joining NATO.
I think the recent update says that Ukraine wants to join EU like right now. It takes a long process to join, but they just want to join right now. That's their demand or something. Right? I'm pretty sure I saw the news.
But Putin can't handle this. He is in total denial. Like an ex-boyfriend who can't handle his ex-girlfriend starting to date someone else, Putin can't let Ukraine go. He won't let go. So for the past decade, he's been trying to keep the West out and bring Ukraine back into the motherland of Russia. This usually takes the form of Putin sending secret soldiers from Russia into Ukraine to help the people in Ukraine who want to separate from Ukraine and join Russia. It also takes the form of, stealing entire parts of Ukraine for Russia.
Russian troops moving swiftly to take control of military bases in Crimea.
Like in 2014, Putin just did this.
To what America is officially calling a Russian invasion of Ukraine.
He went down and just snatched this bit of Ukraine and folded it into Russia. So you're starting to see what's going on here. Putin's life's work is to salvage what he calls the greatest catastrophe of the 20th century, the division and the separation of the Soviet republics from Russia. So let's get to present day. It's 2022. Putin is at it again. And honestly, if you really want to understand the mind of Vladimir Putin and his whole view on this, you have to read this. On the History of Unity of Russians and Ukrainians by Vladimir Putin, a blog post that kind of sounds like a 9th grade history essay. In this essay, Vladimir Putin argues that Russia and Ukraine are one people. He calls them essentially the same historical and spiritual space. Kind of beautiful writing, honestly. Anyway, he argues that the division between the two countries is due to, quote, a deliberate effort by those forces that have always sought to undermine our unity. And that the formula they use, these outside forces, is a classic one: divide and rule. And then he launches into this super in-depth, like 10-page argument as to every single historical beat of Ukraine and Russia's history to make this argument that, like, this is one people and the division is totally because of outside powers, i.e. the West. Okay, but listen, there's this moment at the end of the post that actually kind of hit me in a big way. He says this: just have a look at Austria and Germany, or the US and Canada, how they live next to each other, close in ethnic composition, culture, and in fact sharing one language. They remain sovereign states with their own interests, with their own foreign policy, but this does not prevent them from the closest integration or allied relations. They have very conditional, transparent borders, and when crossing them, citizens feel at home. They create families, study, work, do business.
It's because of European Union. They're part of European Union. That kind of loosens the borders.
Incidentally, so do millions of those born in Ukraine who now live in Russia. We see them as our own close people. I mean, listen, like, I'm not in support of what Putin is doing, but like that's like a pretty solid like analogy. If China suddenly showed up and started like coaxing Canada into being a part of its alliance, I would be a little bit like, what's going on here? That's what Putin feels. And so I kind of get what he means there. There's a deep heritage and connection between these people. And he's seen that falter and dissolve, and he doesn't like it. He clearly, genuinely feels a brotherhood and this deep heritage connection with the people of Ukraine.
Well, if you feel like that, build better political relations with Ukraine, right? Make changes, right, together. That kind of loosens the border, makes it more easier to, I guess, communicate with each other, civilians and everyone. That's the way to do it. Politics.
Okay, Putin, I get it. Your essay is compelling there at the end. You're clearly very smart and well-read. But this does not justify what you've been up to, okay? It doesn't justify sending 100,000 troops to the border, or sending cyber soldiers to sabotage the Ukrainian government, or annexing territory, fueling a conflict that has killed tens of thousands of people in eastern Ukraine. No. Okay? No matter how much affection you feel for Ukrainian heritage and its connection to Russia, this is not okay. Again,
I love you so much, I'm gonna bomb you. How does that work? Do politics, what the fuck?
It's like the boyfriend who genuinely loves his girlfriend. They had a great relationship, but they broke up, and she's free to see whomever she wants. But Putin is not ready to let go.
What the hell's wrong with you? I love you, Jessica. What the hell is wrong with you, dude? Don't fucking touch me. I love you, dude. World star!
Putin has constructed his own reality here, one in which Ukraine is actually being controlled by shadowy Western forces who are holding the people of Ukraine hostage. And if that he invades, it'll be a swift victory because Ukrainians will accept him with open arms, the great liberator.
Don't want to pause too much, but the recent report says that is nowhere near the case, right? Russia's finding way too many problems. The fuels are running out. There are videos of tanks just ran out of fuel on the road, right? The equipment failures even there, right? So, and also Russia is still at the border of the city. So there lots of things are not going the way Putin basically envisioned.
Like, this guy's a total romantic. He's a history buff and a romantic, and he has a hill to die on here. And it is liberating the people who've been taken from the Russian motherland. Kind of like the abusive boyfriend who's like, she actually really loves me, but it's her annoying friends who are planting all these ideas in her head. That's why she broke up with me. And it's like, no, dude, that she's over you.
What the hell's wrong with you? I love you,
He's showing
Jessica.
this
Maybe
video.
this video should be called Putin is just like your abusive ex-boyfriend.
What the hell's wrong with you? I love you, Jessica.
Okay, so where does this leave us? It's 2022. Putin is showing up to these meetings in Europe to tell them where he stands. He says, NATO, you cannot expand anymore. No new members, and you need to withdraw all your troops from Eastern Europe, my neighborhood. He knows these demands will never be accepted because they're ludicrous, but what he's doing is showing a false effort to say, well, we tried to negotiate with the West, but they didn't want to, hence giving a little bit more justification to a Russian invasion. So, will Russia invade? Is there war coming?
Yes.
Maybe. It's impossible to know because it's all inside of the head of this guy. But if I were to make the best argument that war is not coming tomorrow, I would look at a few things. Number one, war in Ukraine would be incredibly costly for Vladimir Putin. Russia has a far superior army to Ukraine.
Yes, that is true. The latest news says that lots of oligarchs lost hundreds of billions, right? Because of all the restrictions, Russia is losing lots of money every single day right now, right? And when it comes to PR, obviously the Ukrainian president, Ukraine in general, right, is gaining more and more. I mean, let's be honest, Ukrainian president was a comedy star. He was an actor, a star. He knows what to do, right? Compared to any general politician. So he's gaining more and more, PR and sympathy around the world, right? Compared to Putin right now. So overall, this feels disaster for Putin.
But still, Ukraine has a very good army that is supported by the West and would give Putin a pretty bad bloody nose in any invasion. Controlling territory in Ukraine would be very hard. Ukraine is a giant country. They would fight back, and it would be very hard to actually...
Seriously, how are they going to do that? I mean, when they took over Crimea, right, there was news that Russia's struggling, its economy struggling just to maintain Crimea. You can't just take over a place and not look after it. If you look after it, that's a strain on your economy. Now, I know you think that there are oil and lots of resources there, but that's going to take time to utilize that. It's not going to be just like instant. So at the start, what are they going to do? I mean, this is just, overall, this is really fucked up. The whole situation is fucked up, right? I'm finding myself every day to just look at the news. Like, I never did that shit. I never just, oh, what's the news right now? Now I'm looking at the news just feeling like terrified, like, oh my God, what's happening now? Right? Because I'm waiting for tragic news, like, let's hope it's not tragic. Let's hope it's not tragic. And when I see something like, okay, the news said the really disaster some happened, like there are way too many losses or something. No, it doesn't say that. I'm like, okay. Because this is a proper war, right? I've never experienced in my life a proper war happening anywhere. Nobody did, right? At least my age. So this is really terrifying. I would never imagine. Every time I saw a history video about war, movies about war, you don't really process that until it actually happens in the world while you are here. Live, something happens. Right now there's war happening in a city, a proper major city with skyscrapers and shit. I'm just thinking that it just feels weird, like what the fuck? I'm scared of seeing the news like too many casualties or something like that.
Conquer and take over territory. Another major point here is that if Russia invades Ukraine, this gives NATO new purpose. If you remember, NATO was created because of the Cold War, because the Soviet Union was big and nuclear powered. Once the Soviet Union fell, NATO sort of has been looking for a new purpose over the past couple decades. If Russia invades Ukraine, NATO suddenly has a brand new purpose to unite and to invest in becoming more powerful than ever. Putin knows that, and it would be very bad news for him if that happened. But most importantly, perhaps the easiest clue for me to believe...
I think people I know people think that being in power means you need to think things way too many, to know things way too many. And that is true. You need to know everything if you are a good leader, right? But in the end, you also have to make a swift decision without thinking too much. So I know what he's thinking about NATO. NATO will get strength and all that. I don't think Putin is thinking all that. I think he's just looking at the end goal. We saw in the real life lore video like how much things Putin can gain by taking over Ukraine, right? Oil and everything. The Crimea doesn't have water, now it can have water. Now there's a defensive land for Russia. Before it wasn't. And in Putin's mind that, invasion can happen in future, right? NATO or basically European countries or West could attack or something. That's in his mind. So for him, it's a massive victory from all sectors. Whatever backlashes happen, I'll weather that or something. He's probably thinking that. He's not thinking, what if NATO gets strengthened? If I have Ukraine, even if NATO gets strengthened, I have Ukraine and the massive border across Moscow, right? Like Soviet Union used to did. Moscow's not that closer to the main border. So I don't know. This could either, this is going to be bad all around, the end result. But how bad it's going to be is the scary part, right? I mean, the worst case scenario is really the worst case scenario. Let's hope that doesn't happen.
War isn't coming tomorrow is the Russian propaganda machine is not preparing the Russian people for an invasion. In 2014, when Russia was about to invade and take over Crimea, this part of Ukraine, there was a barrage of state propaganda that prepared the Russian people that this was a justified attack. So when it happened, it wasn't a surprise and it felt very normal. That isn't happening right now in Russia, at least for now. It may start happening tomorrow, but for now, I think Putin is showing
what?
It may start.
Okay, so he recorded this before he uploaded this in January 29th, and by the January 29th, the propaganda started. So propaganda started for nearly a month before the invasion started. Is that it? Holy shit.
Happening tomorrow, but for now, I think Putin is showing up to the border, flexing his muscles, and showing the West that he is earnest. I'm not sure that he's going to invade tomorrow, but he very well could. I mean, read the guy's blog post and you'll realize that he is a romantic about this. He is incredibly idealistic about the glory days of the Slavic empires, and
oh my God,
he wants to get it back. So there is dangerous momentum towards war. And the way war works is even a small little fight can turn into the other guy doing something bigger and crazier, and then the other person has to respond with something a little bit bigger. That's called escalation. And there's not really a ceiling to how much that momentum can spin out of control. That is why it's so scary when two nuclear countries go to war with each other, because there's kind of no ceiling. So yeah, it's dangerous. This is scary.
Oh my God, that's when I talk about worst case scenario, about all this outcome. This is what I'm thinking of. I have a somewhat cynical mind and too much thinking mind, let's just say. So I'm kind of tracking, after a few days, more days, where this war is going to take, how many countries and which countries are going to get involved, and once that, the escalation will start, right, and where it's going to end. I mean, Putin basically put nuclear bases on alert. What does that mean? Right? I mean, there was somebody commented on my real life war reaction that he's from Germany and he's scared that he armed the nuclear. I'm in India, right? And India is friend to Russia, but even I'm scared right now. Okay, doesn't matter who's friend of what or what is what, right? Nuclear war will be bad for literally every country on the world, because something leads to something, something leads to something, everybody will get involved, and that's just bad. And lots of great philosophers in the past have warned of this, like World War III. Let's just say World War III will be advanced, but World War IV will be fought with stones and sticks, because after World War III, nothing will left. We are at the point that war is scary, and what is happening right now? What the fuck, man? This is scaring me.
Scary. I'm not sure what happens next here, but the best we can do is keep an eye on this. At least for now, we better understand what Putin really wants out of all of this. Thanks for watching.
God. Yeah. This whole situation is really fucked up and scary, right? When I started this channel, I did not think that I'll be reacting to a video which is about the war that is going on right now. And I know certain people say in the real life war video, some people say, what about the war in Iraq, Vietnam, this and that. But like I said, those wars were kind of, somewhat plastered down by some other reason. Like in the Middle East, it's like anti-terror. There is a reason like that, right? It's an anti-terror war. right? Whether it was about terrorism or not, but they painted it anti-terror, and that's what happened, right? Overall, Vietnam is about Soviet Union, a country supporting another country, and that happened. But in Europe, or Ukraine, which is the second biggest landmass country in Europe, Russia versus Ukraine, this is big scary thing after World War II. This is major, way too major. And not just that, in this social media age where everything is telecast, I mean, you go in YouTube, you'll find a live footage of Ukraine city, right? There's a social media and everything involved right now. So everybody gets literal updates of every second everywhere. And you see these streets, cars going by, tanks going through there. It's just like you see a video where somebody's just shooting from some high-rise building. You see high-rise buildings in the distance, and then you see explosions, sirens, and you see this major city, Kiev, a capital city, and you're like, holy shit, how is this happening? I mean, immediately you start to imagine, what if this happened to your city? What would you feel at that time? This is surreal moment. Surreal is the only word I have, because I can't process anything besides that. This is really fucked up for everybody that's involved, right? Most people, even the Russians, don't want this war, and I bet soldiers are also part of it. So imagine Ukrainian soldiers, Russian soldiers fighting, thinking, why am I doing this? Because like he said, Ukraine and Russia, there's way too much heritage there that is involved. Lots of relatives are from the other borders. How are you supposed to go there and fight knowing like I'm fighting in a city where lots of my relatives are? I'm bombing the city where my relatives are. I mean, the mentality of the soldiers, this is just, yeah. Alright, people, and not just that, what's gonna happen to those relations, right, after this? Are those relations gonna sour, like, okay, Russia attacked Ukraine, so are the relations gonna get sour, or what's gonna happen? This is really weird time. Right, people, that was the real reason Putin is invading Ukraine, by the channel Johnny Hair. Johnny Hair is a really quality channel. He explains things in very detail. His presentation is great. Even the whole video editing is great too. So yeah, I'll see you next time.